Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to another SVT Dharma talk. And today we're going to be looking at good words. And good words, as Bhante Vimramsa used to say in his take on right speech, was the harmonious communication. So that's the topic. And to start, we're going to start first of all with the Namo Tassa and follow through with looking at the Sutta. So Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Okay, so good words. Well, there are a number of locations in the Buddhist suttas where the Buddha describes what for him is a very important aspect of practice, and that is harmonious communication or right speech. And I've always found it very helpful to take a perspective on this that Bhante Vimalaramsi used to have of harmonious communication, because it broadens it out from speech. We think of speech as, you know, what we send out into the world. But when we start thinking of harmonious communication, it's about something much broader. And it includes how we talk to ourselves, as well as how we speak to others, and how we communicate. And the communication, if we think of it as the communication in the wider sense, then body language and facial expression and all of these things become part of this right speech. So to start with, I'm going to look at the Sutta Nipāta, and I'm working with the translation by Sadatissa. And it's in chapter 3, and it's the third sutta in chapter 3. And it's called the Supasitta Sutta, Good Words. Thus have I heard. Once, when the Buddha was staying in the Jeta Grove near Savatthi, he said this to his monks: speech, which has 4 characteristics, is speech well spoken, is blameless, and not censured by the wise. Namely, the speech of a monk who speaks only what is wholesome and not what is unwholesome, who speaks only what is worthy and not what is unworthy, who speaks only what is pleasant and not what is unpleasant, and who speaks only what is truthful and not what is untruthful. Speech characterized by these 4 factors is well-spoken and not ill-spoken, blameless and not censured by the wise. So these 4 characteristics: wholesome, worthy, pleasant, and truthful. Well, what does it mean to have speech that is wholesome? Well, here again, I find it very helpful to take forward what Bhante Vimramsa used to say about what constitutes the wholesome. And the wholesome, from his perspective, was whatever we didn't take personally. So unwholesome acts were acts where we'd worked from a place of taking some of our response from a personal perspective. So when we take something personally, we become the center of our response. And what we're looking for here, and what Bhante Brahmramsi used to describe, was what does it take to move from the unwholesome to the wholesome? And what he would say is it takes right effort. And right effort that Bhante used to describe was the 6 R's. So what's happening here? Well, the first R is to recognize. And what is it that we're recognizing? Well, at a physiological sense, we recognize that we've built tension in the body. From a mental perspective, we're no longer on the object of our attention. So in our meditation, we've moved away from the meditation object. But in daily life, we've moved away from a place of balance. And why have we moved away from a place of balance? Because we've taken something personally. And that's exactly the same in the meditation. When something comes up, a sensation from a physical sensation or any aspect of the 6 senses, the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the physical body, or a thought in the mind that we've taken personally. And when we've taken it personally, it takes us out of the meditation. And when it takes us out of the meditation, what we've got are the hindrances, because the hindrances occur when we take something personally. And so the hindrances of attachment or aversion or of restlessness and anxiety or of sloth and torpor or of skeptical doubt. So that process then fuels our communication. So if we're going to communicate from a state of wholesomeness rather than the unwholesome, we're going to have to come back from that distraction of taking something personally. And so the 6 R's are a very important aspect in daily life as they are in our meditation practice, to recognize that we've taken something personally, to release away from the attachment that that's created. So when we take something personally, there's a whole energy movement, and the energy moves in the direction that attachment takes the mind. And often we get a series of cascading thoughts. For instance, if we look at something that perhaps has made us angry, then there's a whole lot of cascading thoughts around that. And so what we've done is by taking it personally and attaching to it, we've redirected the energy to these cascading thoughts. And so we need to release away from that. And one of the real strengths of what Bhante Brahmramsi taught was that we can redirect our attention to the tension around our physical brain and in our body. Because when we take something personally, that tension is there. It can be a subtle tension, or it can be a really intense gripping, or anything in between. But once we're aware of the tension, we are no longer caught in the thought. And the thought or the sensation in the body or the sight that we're seeing or whatever that's taken our attention, we've redirected the nutriment of our attention from that to the effect within ourselves. So we soften around the tension around our brain, but we also soften around any tension in the body. There's often a very strong somatic pattern that we have, and that can be very individual. There may be certain universal trends, but they can also be very individual. So if we're feeling angry, we might feel like a hot flushing up in the body and a tensing in the shoulders and the neck. If we're feeling afraid, we might feel a tightness around the heart. If we're feeling insecure and around something, we might feel like the need to tense around the lower back to give us a greater sense of support. These are generalizations. They could be individual. And indeed, I had one client who had chronic tension in their calves and went to many specialists and doctors around this. But it was only through the process of meditation did they realize that their response when they took something personally manifested in that way. So the physical body is a very, very good and reliable feedback for what is going on. And so Bhante Viram's invitation to soften around the brain, which is a physical softening, and to soften around any tension in the body is very important to recognize. So we recognize, we release, and we relax this tension. Okay. Now that's a process that Bhante used to describe as purification. So we've taken taking it personally, and we've come into the body, and we've released that tension, or we've had the intention to release it. And it's very important to recognize that the tension doesn't have to disappear, but your relationship in choosing to soften around it has changed. And that's what's very important to understand. So this is a purification process. But then there's a retraining process. And this is a distinction that Sister Kima used to really like to make, that you can't just purify, you have to retrain the mind as well. And the retraining is the second part of the 6 R's. And that is having released this tension, we re-smile. And in re-smiling, we're sending a different signal to the brain. We're sending a signal to the brain that things are safe. So this relaxing is the part of that signaling, and the smiling is another part. And when we start to send a signal to our brain that things are safe, our mind goes from this very contracted place when we've taken something personally into a much more expansive, wide opening place and a listening place. So we re-smile, we return to whatever we were doing. So if we're meditating, that's our meditation object. But in daily life, it's, coming back, as it were, into the present, being aware of how we are, perhaps feeling our feet on the floor, recognizing that we're standing, just connecting to what is right now. And then the 6th R is to anticipate that we will be doing this many, many times. We'll be repeating it. So repetition isn't a sign of failure. Repetition is a sign of that we're recognizing this process is central to our experience as a human being. And so we shouldn't go through that cycle of, judgment, this has happened again, or criticism, why am I like this? But we can go through a process of forgiveness, if you like, of just saying, this is here again. That's okay. Whilst this cycle happens, I'm continuing to learn. And so that first stage of right speech or harmonious communication is all about what's happening within ourselves as well as our expression externally. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the better basis to have a communication with anything or any situation, any context, any individual? Is it from a place of taking something personally and being driven by that energy? Or is it to come back into the wholesome state? Often when we're taking something personally, we're wanting to transfer an uncomfortable feeling onto somebody else. Not because we're deliberately trying to do that, but that it's so uncomfortable, we want to get rid of it. And often one of the easiest ways of getting rid of it is to give it to somebody else. And when we do that, there's often a sense of relief, but it's temporary. It's like we've put down a heavy load. It's that feeling of temporary relief. And then we see the impact of what's happening. And then we have to deal with that as well. So, right speech. First of all, speak only what is wholesome from a place of not taking something personally and not what is unwholesome. And if we find that we've spoken from somewhere, from a place that's unwholesome, we need to forgive ourselves and then try to redress the balance with whoever or whatever the situation is. So, we can simply apologize and say, I'm sorry, that I found triggering, and and I've responded in a way which is not appropriate to actually this situation, or whatever else we might want to say. So then we have to speak only what is worthy and not what is unworthy. Well, the way I think of worthy is the sense of worth. What is the worth of what I'm about to say? What is the benefit? What is the good in what I'm about to say? And this is an important consideration, because if it isn't, or if it doesn't have worth, why am I saying it? And so we need to reflect in speech around the way we respond. Now, this doesn't mean that every exchange we have to be sort of categorizing things before we say. No, normal communication is fine. But when we're in a situation where we can see perhaps we're going to take something personally, or we can see that there's an intention in the mind which isn't looking after the person that we're about to be talking to, isn't looking after the situation, then we have to ask ourselves, what is the value of this? And part of this process is very well described in another sutta that I'll be working with today, in how do we actually put this into practice. So this is worthy or unworthy. And then what is pleasant or unpleasant? Now, we have to be very careful with interpreting sutta sometimes, because we can put our own take on things. And what we can see here about the pleasant or the unpleasant is, well, maybe I only need to only speak about positive things, or only speak about good things. No, there's clearly times when we need to do something different to that. But what is the basis? What is the intention that we have? Where are we coming from? Are we saying this with the basis of kindness? Or are we saying it from a basis of irritation or anger or even hatred? So sometimes we have to give difficult news. We have to give difficult information. We have to point out things. Can we do it in a pleasant way or an unpleasant way? And then only speak what is truthful and what is not untruthful. Well, this is also a tricky one, because there are many things that are truthful which are not, if you like, helpful for people to know or to be told. Truth itself does not give something that we're saying legitimacy. So we need to balance all of these four things in order to have this harmonious communication. So that is what the master said. And having said this, he went on as teacher to say this: wholesome speech, the saints say, is the foremost. One should speak what is worthy and not what is unworthy, and this is the second. One should speak what is pleasant and not what is unpleasant, and this is the third. And one should speak what is truthful and not what is false, and this is the fourth. Then a monk called Vangisa got up from his seat and went up to the Buddha. He respectfully placed his robe on one shoulder and with his hands placed together asked the master for permission to speak. Having obtained it, he spoke these appropriate words of praise. Let us use words that do not cause us pain. Let us use words that do not hurt each other. Those truly are wholesome words. So what I would say there is that sometimes we do have to say something to someone which will make them uncomfortable. We can't always not hurt someone, but the hurt they feel is not the intention behind what we're saying. The hurt may come from their response or their challenge in hearing something. And so the hurt here is about the intention. Do we have the intention to hurt others? Or sometimes certain information is necessary for someone's growth. So in the Patimokkha, in the twice monthly grouping of monastics, there's a time of confession where a monk may point out something that they've done which they need support around. But there's also times in part of the process of the monastic life where someone else, another monk, may need to point out something for the benefit of someone else in the order. And that isn't always a comfortable thing to do. But it's done from the basis of helping them in their practice. And so sometimes hurt is unavoidable, but what we need to recognize is what is our intention. And can we then provide the loving space for someone to come into balance around that sense of hurt? Let us use pleasant speech where the words make people glad, not resorting to evil speech. Let us use pleasant speech on others. So again, the way we interpret this is we have to be thinking it in the broadest of terms, because again, not all of our speech can make people glad. So, for instance, Ananda learning of the death of Sariputta made him very, very sad. But that whoever actually told him, it was, a necessary and beneficial thing to do. So we can't always condition or control the conditions so that everyone is always feeling happy and glad. But we can provide the support for them to come into balance around the information that's necessary to impart. The words of truth are immortal. This is an eternal nature. As the old saying goes, words of truth cannot die, and good people, they say, are well grounded in truth, welfare, and virtue. Well, of course, the truth here is describing the Dharma. This is the truth of the Dharma and discussing this. So what's important here is to recognize that this is not, if you like, everyday truths. So there are some times when we know something to be true, but simply to say it as a fact may not be beneficial or helpful to people. And I'll come on to that in a moment. And the words which the Buddha speaks, words that lead to blowing out, so this is Nibbana, putting to an end to suffering, are the worthiest of words. So the communication that promotes and extends and develops people's practice, this is the most valuable of communications. So I want to then move from this sutta, because that's a short sutta there, to the Majjhima Nikāya, and it's Majjhima Nikāya 58. And here we've initially got a challenge to the Buddha coming, where the young prince and Prince Abhaya has been set a challenge by a member of another sect to try and catch out the Buddha. And it's all around right speech. And the invitation here is that, are there ever times when the Buddha would speak something that is unwelcome and disagreeable? And as you can see from the first sutta, if we have a very simple reading of the first sutta, the answer would be no. But we have to understand the context. And when we begin to understand the context, then we begin to see that there are times when the disagreeable and the unwelcome is necessary. But it's about how we communicate that. So imagine this situation. We've got the prince, and he's got a young baby, a child, maybe a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old in his lap, as he's talking to the Buddha. And he asks the Buddha, "Venerable Sir, would a Tathagata, someone who is fully enlightened, utter such speech as would be unwelcome and disagreeable to others?" And the Buddha is, whenever he's faced with these sorts of questions, you get a very good feeling for what the teaching of the Buddha is, because he resorts to what is the context. Yes. So he doesn't debate a single point. He widens it out into the context. So the Buddha's answer is, there is no one-sided answer to that, Prince. Right? And then he goes on to ask the Prince a particular question. What do you think, Prince? If while you or your nurse were not attending to this young infant in your lap, this child were to put a stick or a pebble into their mouth, what would you do? Venerable Sir, I would take it out. If I could not take it out at once, I would take the head in my left hand and crooking a finger in my right, I would take it out, even if it meant drawing blood. Why is that? Because I have compassion for the child. So now we're beginning to see a wider context. What is the compassionate thing to do? Even if it is unpleasant or unwelcome or disagreeable. So too, Prince, Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial, and which is also unwelcome and disagreeable to others, such speech the Tathagata does not utter. So that's the untrue, the incorrect, and the unbeneficial. Well, I think we can all understand that the world might be a better place if we adopted those. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be true and correct, but unbeneficial, and which is also unwelcome and disagreeable to others. Such speech the Tathagata does not utter. So even if it's true and correct, but it is not worthy, it's not beneficial, then the Tathagata doesn't speak it. Okay, so a lot of social dialogue is around things that are true and correct, but we have a questionable beneficial effect. And we can think of perhaps gossip as falling into some of this. I mean, some gossip just isn't true and it's perpetuating untruths. But simply because it's true and correct isn't a reason to propagate it out. Yeah, we have to ask ourselves, what is the beneficial aspect of this? Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be true, correct, and beneficial. So true, correct, and beneficial. But which is unwelcome and disagreeable to others. The Tathagata knows the time to use such speech. Okay, so here the context is everything. Just because it's true, correct, and beneficial doesn't mean we don't have to think about when is the most appropriate time to communicate that. Such speech the Tathagata knows to be untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial, but is welcome and agreeable to others. Such speech the Tathagata does not utter. So here again, untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial. But people would enjoy hearing it. This is not what the Tathagata would speak. So again, a lot of social dialogue can fall into this category. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be true and correct, but unbeneficial, and which is welcome and agreeable to others. Such speech the Tathagata does not utter, because it's unbeneficial. So now we're beginning to see, how we can begin to work with what's going on with our own communication. Yeah. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be true, correct, and beneficial, and which is welcome and agreeable to others. The Tathagata knows the time to use such speech. So even when it's true, correct, beneficial, welcome by others, and agreeable to others, the Buddha still thinks about when the right time for this is appropriate. Why is that? So why does he go through this process of analysis? Because the Tathagata has compassion for beings. And so here we have the importance of intention. Intention is driving this. Clarity of seeing, clarity of intention. Because if our intention is for the compassionate well-being of others, then this consideration is part of that process. And I think we can all remember times when, we've chosen to speak, either because we wanted to be the person that imparted that information, or this piece of news was kind of red hot, and whilst it's red hot, it has currency, and currency then enables us to be, the person that's connected to news or knows the information, or all of these things, and that's all about me. That's another part of unwholesome speech, because it's me taking it personally. It's me wanting, others to listen to me. This is the motivation. And so this worthiness and unworthiness is an important aspect to reflect upon, because only then do we begin to see what the motivation behind the way we speak, and begin to understand that we need the discipline of the practice to see clearly how we're choosing to communicate. And how does this work within ourselves? Well, self-communication, the way we talk to ourselves, is really, really important. That dialogue we have first thing in the morning sets up the whole way we perceive the day. I remember on one occasion, I determined that I was going to get up very early in the morning because there was so much that I needed to do. And then for whatever reason, I didn't hear the alarm. And I woke up several hours later than I'd intended. And as soon as I realized that, my mind went, well, what's the point? You haven't got the time to do it now. And there was the communication. And it felt like everything that I wanted to try and achieve was almost impossible. And then I saw that process go on in my mind. And I kind of wondered, well, what can I do about that? And then the thought just came up in my mind. Let's just pretend it's 2 hours ago. Where would I be feeling? What would I be feeling right now? And then I felt the energy just come back to get on with everything that needed to happen. And I remember that in that day, that even though I thought there was so much to do, everything just kind of unfolded and developed, and I got through all that I needed to do. But that voice, that inner dialogue, which said, "Oh, what's the point? You've messed up. You've screwed up. You've not got up like you said, and now it's not going to be worth trying." We're all familiar with this internal dialogue that we have. And so how do we work with it? Well, we work with the 6 R's again. We recognize that we've taken something personally, which is this dialogue. Because one of the things about our internal voice is we believe that the internal voice is actually truth. And it's not. It's it's a combination of past beliefs, past patterns, what we've been told about ourselves, all these other things, what we've learned, what is a cultural filter, our aspirations, our wishes, and all the rest of it. And what comes through is just a verbalization of that. And we can question that. We can see, is this beneficial or is it unbeneficial? Is it actually truth, or is it simply my mind constructing something? And so we need also to look very carefully about how we talk to ourselves. And when we begin to do this, we begin to see that that voice which basically closes us down is very judgmental and self-critical. When we work with the 6 R's, when we work with our willingness to see that this isn't a truth, that it's not necessarily correct. There may be something factual there. Yes, I woke up 2 hours later. But that in itself does not then mean the rest of the day is a write-off. So when we use the 6 R's in our self-communication and choose to come back into balance in the same way as we might do when we're angry externally, and here the physical body is really, really helpful. We come back, just feel the physical body. Why feel the physical body? Because it takes us into the present. When we're using the 6 R's, remember, we're recognizing that we've taken something personally. We're releasing the energy by redirecting our attention, because it's our attention on that distraction. Sensation in the body, thought in the mind, or whatever. It's our attention which is feeding it. So if we redirect our attention, we're not feeding it at that moment. And Bhante Venerable used to say, redirect your attention to seeing the somatic impact of that, the tension around the brain, the sensation in the body. And one of the things that we like to do when Sarah and myself are teaching is we invite people not only to see that tension, but come into the energetic body. And the energetic body, you'll find, the center of the energetic body is below the navel, halfway in the body. It's an energetic center. Many different traditions talk about this. And one of the things that we can do by just resting into the energetic center is it allows us to release the body. And we can release the body by relaxing tension. And that tension is the consequence of our attention into the unwholesome. Because Bhante Venerable used to describe this tension as craving, tanha. And tanha is the I like it, I don't like it mind. It's that gripping onto, and then the clinging, the story about why I don't like it. Oh, I've got up late. You're no good, Hugh. You can't get this act together. And then you begin to inhabit the story. There's no point in even starting now. And then with that story comes the habitual responses, which is, well, this is a waste of time, feeling depressed about it, haven't been able to get, all of the sort of habitual responses that we have to whatever that dialogue is. And when we release the tension, or if we don't release the tension, but we release our attitude to the tension by softening around it, we cut off this energy. And coming in and resting in the energetic and feeling our physical body is a way of redirecting our attention and cutting off the fuel, not by a distraction. It's very important to understand that. We could distract ourselves by doing something else. Yeah? And the Buddha said, people come to meditation or investigation for one reason and one reason only, and that is dukkha. Well, when this tension is there, it's dukkha. And he said, but even recognizing dukkha isn't enough, because many people who then recognize dukkha go to distraction to appease how they feel. And only a minority go to investigation of the dukkha. And that's what right effort is. It's an investigation of the dukkha. We see the dukkha has arisen. We soften around it. That's the purification. But then we need to retrain the mind. And we re-smile and come back. And in that process, because we've brought awareness to that, we begin to see the causality. Distraction won't show us the causality. But if we stay with the process of the 6 R's, we begin to see the dependent origination around that. So we begin to see the contact. In this case that we're describing here, speech, internal communication, thinking. This is the mind, the 6th of the senses. But it could be a sight, it could be a sound, it could be a taste, it could be a touch, it could be a smell. But here we're thinking about communication in the sense of thought in the mind. So we see that contact arise. We see the unpleasant feeling it created. Or it could be a pleasant feeling if we're being distracted by the pleasant as well. And then we see the arising of the craving, the I like it or I don't like it mind. And with it, the story. And that's a very quick process. We might catch it at the arising of tanha, with the tension just starting and release. Or we might see the story starting and then we 6R. Or we might be in the habitual tendencies, metaphorically beating ourselves up around what's going, and then we 6R. We might see it in the birth of action. We start to do something, because we're feeling angry or whatever, and then we 6R. Wherever we catch it, we're changing the way we communicate with ourselves. And this is really important. So the whole of good communication, harmonious communication, has the whole of the Eightfold Path in it as well. So it's not just an aspect of the Eightfold Path, because it's if you like, it's a key that unlocks the possibility of seeing the whole of the Eightfold Path. And one of the advantages of harmonious communication is that we have the opportunity to do this all day long. We're constantly communicating with ourselves and with others and with the environment and the conditions that we find. So what is the nature of our communication? And so this teaching of the Buddha is really, really helpful to bring the Dharma into daily life. Of course, we need to be forgiving, because when it goes wrong, we need to come back into balance. And when it goes wrong, the quickest way back into balance is to forgive ourselves and then redress the balance as best we can with the circumstances that we're in. So, wholesome speech, the saints say, is the foremost. One should speak what is worthy and not what is unworthy, and this is the second. One should speak what is pleasant and not what is unpleasant, and this is the third. One should speak what is truthful and not what is untruthful, and this is the fourth. Let's just take a few moments to reflect on what we've heard from the Buddha. One of the beauties of working through the suttas is that we're listening to the words of the Buddha again. So these aren't my thoughts, they're my interpretation, but it's important that we go back to what the Buddha said. And one of the beautiful things about the suttas is we recognize the humanity of what the Buddha is saying, and that it hasn't changed in 2,500 years. So just close your eyes for a moment. You can settle yourself in the way that you're familiar, or let me just talk you through working with the energetic body. So bring your attention below the navel, halfway in the body, and just have the intention to be supported here. And then simply relax your body. You don't have to keep your attention at the center, but just relax your body now. Softly rotate your inner thighs. It's a inward movement. It helps release the hips. Drop the inner edge of the shoulder blades. Helps open you around the heart. It's not a pulling down. It's a subtle rotation. Gently smile to release your neck. And let your whole spine come into balance. And then bring up the feeling of loving kindness. As we allow our body and mind and heart to come into balance. So let there be space all the way around your heart. Let the mind be open and expansive. Let there be space in the sacrum, base of the spine. May you be well, may you be happy. May your mind be peaceful and calm. May your mind be expansive. And your heart open, accepting, and full of love. Connect to your breath and the sense of contact with the chair or the floor. Take a deliberate breath in and out. And gently open your eyes. Okay, so any questions or thoughts or comments around today's talk?
Yeah, I have a question. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go on, Pai.
Okay. You said there was two aspects to the 6 R's. There was
Mm.
something and retrain. What was the first?
Purification of the mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was a division that Sister Kima was particularly keen on. And it was to get people away from just going through the relaxed step. The relaxed step does not generate the same thing as the full 6 R's. And the challenge sometimes with just the relaxed step is that it does make the mind calm, but it doesn't reveal the process.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay.
Hugh, I also have a question. Thank you firstly for this wonderful, wonderful talk and for this small exercise that you just did. I think it really opened my heart. My question is that, you talked about investigation, of that particular thing. I think you said something to the effect of, whenever you face dukkha, instead of going into that emotion, you investigate that as an emotion and you seek sour. Now I don't know how to investigate it. So whenever I am faced with grief or anger, which are my very familiar emotions these days, I think as much as I become aware of the fact that I am getting, sucked into that emotion, so I kind of come back to the present moment. I don't know how to investigate it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I think this is thank you very much for the question, because I think it's an excellent question, because it's so familiar. One of the things that I personally find very helpful is to recognize that when we're in grief, for instance, or we're in anger, the rational part of the brain often is not available to us. So what's happening here? Well, when we get hijacked by anger, for instance, the limbic system kicks in. It's a fight or flight response. And the thing about the limbic system is it's basically sitting right on top of the brainstem and connecting to the body. And the usual ways that we would control emotion or control behavior are part of the other parts of the brain, the prefrontal cortex and the rest of it, but it's part of the crinkly part of the brain, if you like. And the difficulty is that the signal literally that goes out to that part of the brain and comes back is 90 nanoseconds slower than the signal that's going straight from the limbic system into the body. So we get flooded. We don't hear the signal coming back from our normal ways of regulating our emotions or thoughts, because we're drowned out by something much bigger. So your reaction is absolutely familiar for many people. So what can we do? Well, what you can do is see the results of that signal, which is what's going on in the body. So if we're angry, well, there's tension. Right? So what we can then go, rather than try and rationalize the anger away, is we can direct our attention into how the anger is manifesting, the physicality. And with the physicality, we can then choose to relax without trying to resolve what we're angry about. Okay, so we might be angry for all the right reasons. I'm trying to think of a sort of righteous anger, and it's difficult to bring something to mind. But for instance, if we're with a young child and they rush out into the road, and we shout at them to stop because they haven't looked one way or the other, and then the temptation is to be angry with the child for doing that. But of course, the anger is coming from the discomfort, the intense discomfort we feel. Okay, what we can do is recognize the discomfort we're feeling and choose to soften around something of that. Now, when we soften, it's not about it disappearing, but we're changing our relationship to it. And when we choose to soften around something, what we're doing is, in the way that I like to think of this is the loving kindness. We're creating the loving space to feel our own pain. Okay. And when we allow ourselves that loving space to feel our own pain, we're being self-compassionate. And when we're prepared to feel the pain rather than act from the pain, then the mind begins to open out. And then we begin to see the patterns that are going on. And then we begin to see the process, the dependent origination, the conditionality. So what we're doing there is the 6 R's in daily practice. With grief is subtly different. Grief, we have an energy coming in. So we're reminded perhaps of something. And the case in point for me, for instance, my father died many, many decades ago. And there'll be something that triggers a memory perhaps. And I can feel this energy coming in. Now, if I tense at that point, that energy gets caught inside me and becomes grief. But if when I notice this energy coming through, I soften and relax, the energy passes through me, not in a way that I ignore, because the presence of the energy gives me the capacity to, if you like, be present with the memory, to recognize, to honor that person. But it arises, it passes through and goes out the other side, rather than getting stuck within. And so as I get used to this, I see this as an honoring of the individual, but not a holding on. So the energy is allowed to then disappear, and I don't feel a sense of loss around the disappearance of that energy. Rather, I feel a sense of presence with the energy as it goes through. Please come back on those descriptions.
Thank you. This was helpful.
Okay. It's a way of finding a process of bringing the Dharma into daily life. If the Dharma doesn't help us in daily life, it's not the Dharma. Because, the truth needs to be in everything, not just when we sit on the mat or on the cushion. And if we can begin to integrate the Dharma into daily life, we begin to extend our meditation into everything we do. And my personal belief is that's the way we should go. And Bhante Vimramsi, he published a book, Meditation is Life, Life is Meditation, I think it's called. And in that title alone, I think he's describing probably better than I can, the way that we want to integrate our practice into everything, not make it special, not make it different, but just make it ubiquitous to everything that we do. Okay. Anyone else like to make a comment or an observation, or maybe there's a question?
I just want to thank you, Hugh, for the reminder. I think I am gonna be more careful with my timing. I think my timing in terms of the communication aspect is off quite often. So this is a good reminder to perhaps try to listen and read the room more before actually trying to say anything. Yeah, because I do have an impatient nature sometimes, so I tends to just so yeah, thanks for the reminder. Timing is important.
And if it's involving people we know well, and we see that actually our timing's a little off, we can go back to them and go, well, say, I'm sorry that that caused some upset. What would have been better? Because sometimes we can't see it for ourselves, and then we can listen to what someone else says.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So Milind, how did you get on with the sutta?
Yeah, thank you. Just I want to say one thing, as you said in last in our couple of communication about the grief. You are saying that have to analyze that energy. So when we are starting our meditation, at that moment we think about the happiest moment of our life. In the same way, the energy at that moment, we feel the happiest moment, feelings is there. So in similar way, we understand the grief energy. You mean to say like that in a similar way?
Yes, I mean, we could work exactly the same way. We could bring up the memory of someone we've held dear and who's no longer with us. Doesn't mean they've necessarily died, but we feel a sense of loss in our life, maybe a friendship that's disappeared and that we no longer have, or whatever. And we could work with it in exactly the same way. We could see the energy come up, and just soften around that. So sometimes that's quite helpful. When I work with people on a one-to-one basis, there'll be times when I seed their experience by making a suggestion for this, so that they become familiar with this energy that comes up and their instinctive relationship to it, and how that relationship can begin to change to their benefit and to the benefit of others. So we don't need to be fearful of this energy, but a lot of the time we can have that relationship to it. It's about our relationship to the energy, our relationship to the circumstance. That's what we're working with. And a lot of the Buddha's teaching is about how do we relate? How do we relate to the circumstances we find? How do we relate to our meditation experience? And the invitation and Bhante Vimra's practice and teaching was all about not trying to generate particular states of mind, but in the relating to whatever comes up, then the practice unfolds. So he would be very keen to describe that we don't try to achieve particular Brahma Viharas, but if we begin to work with the loving kindness and we begin to work with right effort, then the Brahma Viharas will unfold and expand on their own. And similarly with the states of jhana, we don't look to achieve a particular jhana, but we're looking to develop the circumstances and the conditions for the jhanas to arrive, which is our relationship to the hindrances. And then as we begin to work with that, the jhanas develop. And then what we notice in our practice is that we'll begin to move through the jhanas as a natural consequence of maintaining the conditions. And so we don't need to be afraid of the different energies that come in. What we have to do is set up the conditions so that we can have a balanced relationship to the energies that come in.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes.
So Nanda, how did you find today?
That's brilliant talk. Thank you very much, Hugh. Could you kindly tell a little bit more about how to relax the head, please?
Okay. So if you're finding your practice that there's some tension going on in the head, then there's a couple of things that may be occurring here. The most common is that we're just trying too hard. We're making a little bit too much effort, and that in itself, either through the production of concentration or in the desire to have the benefit of the 6 R's. You see, the thing to recognize about the 6 R's is they are not a club to beat anything with. And the temptation with the 6 R's sometimes is to use them to change states of mind. And rather than do that, they're there to show you your relationship to states of mind. And that's a subtly different place. So the 6 R is there to show you that the mind has got distracted, to see the consequence of the distraction, the tension, the craving that's built up, to change the relationship to what's built up, which is the softening, and to substitute the unwholesome, which is something that we've taken personally, with the wholesome, which is the smile and coming back to one of the Brahma Viharas. That's the process. But the process isn't one of trying to stop the mind moving. And Bhante Ramsey was very clear that meditation is about seeing how the mind moves from one mind state to another, not to stop the mind moving. Now, as our practice develops, we catch the movements of mind earlier and earlier, but it's not a question of stopping the movements of mind. So even up in the high states of the realm of nothingness, we're still present with whatever the movement of mind is, and that stage we might just be relaxing away from that movement because it hasn't even generated into a thought. But we're still present with the movements of mind. And those subtle movements of mind, that's restlessness. And restlessness is one of the very last aspects of the mind that disappears at the state of arahatship. So restlessness is going to be around for a great deal of time for the vast majority of us. So we're going to need to build a relationship to restlessness. And if we're trying to use the 6 R's, for instance, to stop restlessness, that in itself can create tension in the head. The other thing around it is that sometimes, for instance, if we're dealing with very strong emotions, we can see how the mind has got quite gripped. So then if we 6 R, and we keep checking in to see, has that gripping disappeared? Then we can feel this tension. Whereas what Bhante Ramsey used to say is just 6 R the once. And soften around the brain just the once. Doesn't matter if the tension disappears. Soften in the body just the once and come back. Now, we might find that the mind disappears off again in an unwholesome thought, and we just do it again, just the once. Because Bhante was very clear. He said, look, you can sit for half an hour, and if your mind goes off 50 times, and 50 times you 6 R and come back, this is still a good meditation. Because you've seen movements of mind from one mind state to the other. So he would describe, when the mind is completely calm and peaceful and all the rest of it. He said, well, if you went to an interview and said that to him, he'd say to you, oh, okay, so you've had some candy, you've had a bit of a sweet from a sweet shop. That's nice. But what have you learned? Because from his perspective, and this is where some of his teaching is a little different, from his perspective, it is in the movements of mind that the learning comes. Okay, so this extra tension in the mind can be from too much effort, or because we're trying to use the 6 R's, and we're using the 6 R's, and then we're checking if the 6 R's have been successful, but we're categorizing success as a release of tension, whereas what we're doing is we're changing our relationship to the tension by inviting the softening. the softening might not be successful in the first instance, don't worry. Just keep going through the cycle and don't leave out the body. Soften around any tension in the body as well. Yeah? Because that tension, just like the tension around the brain is part of the physical body. The Bhante Veneranda didn't say relax the mind. He said relax around the physical brain. So relax in the body and come back to your object of attention. If you get pulled away again, come back, relax around that, smile, come back, but do all of the 6 R's. Please come back, Nanda, and say and tell me if that's addressing what your question was, or please.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Good. Okay. And any other questions? So again, this dialogue around communication, we see it all the time. You know, we see it in conversations where, you know, maybe we feel the need to defend us, to be defensive, or for instance. Well, whenever that need to come up and be defensive is there, that itself is taking things personally. So we can see that and soften around it. And often it feels like a closing of the heart, for instance. So drop the inner edge of the shoulder blades, soften around the heart, allow that to open up and release. Just allow this practice to extend into all aspects of daily life. Okay. And remember, communication can be non-verbal. So you might be doing something practical and get annoyed. You know, it's not going right. That's another form of communication. And we can 6R around that and come back and relax. Communication is in so many different forms. Okay, so thank you, May, for hosting this.
Thanks so much, Hugh.
Thank you,
Okay, so should we close with
sharing of merits?
Sharing of merit.
Mhm.
May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day. And I look forward to the time when we get the chance to do this again.
Great. Thank you. Have a good week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.